A young woman was brutally stabbed to death on a quiet city train by a complete stranger she had never even spoken to. Her name was Iryna Zaretska, a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee who thought she had finally found safety in America. But in just 4 minutes of an ordinary train ride, her life ended in the most sudden and senseless way imaginable. Iryna was only 23, a girl full of life, creativity, and ambition. Her friends and family described her as warm, gentle, and deeply compassionate. She loved animals more than anything and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Back in Ukraine, her life had been constantly shadowed by the terror of war. She had heard the rumble of airstrikes overhead, had rushed to shelters when bombs shook the ground, and had seen her neighborhood transform into a battlefield. For her and her family, escaping was not just a desire, it was a matter of survival. So she fled to America with her mother, her brother, and her sister, hoping to rebuild in a land that promised safety, and rebuild what she did. Despite all the trauma of leaving her home, she adapted quickly. She picked up English faster than most thought possible, smiling her way through the difficulties of learning a new culture. She found a job at a local pizza shop in Charlotte, North Carolina, where customers remembered her as kind, diligent, and always polite. She was working toward that dream of going to school, helping animals, and giving her family a better life. For once, it seemed like things were finally starting to align in her favor. But on the night of August 22, 2023, everything changed in a matter of seconds. It was just before 10 o'clock. Iryna had finished her shift and was heading home like she had done so many nights before. She boarded a light rail train in Charlotte, probably tired, maybe thinking about what she would do the next day. She took a seat without realizing that just a few feet away sat a man she had never met before, a man whose troubled past and unstable mind would destroy everything in an instant. That man was Carlos Brown. Security footage from that train would later reveal the horrifying truth. The two never spoke. They never even exchanged a glance. For about 4 minutes, Iryna simply sat there, unaware of the danger in her presence. Then, without a word, Brown reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her 3 times. It was fast, sudden, and completely unprovoked. Witnesses froze in shock. Before anyone could react, Iryna collapsed. By the time police arrived, she was gone. Brown casually walked away from the train, as though nothing had happened. But he didn't get far. Authorities quickly arrested him and charged him with first-degree murder. The senselessness of the attack horrified the community. How could a complete stranger commit such a brutal act on someone who had never wronged him? The answer lay not only in Brown's past, but also in the cracks of a system that had repeatedly failed to stop him before tragedy struck. Brown was no ordinary passenger. His record painted the picture of a deeply troubled man. He had served 5 years in prison for armed robbery back in 2014. Over the years, he had accumulated more than a dozen arrests. Reports revealed he had been homeless, unstable, and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Even his own mother admitted she had long feared what he might do. She had begged for help, even sought legal orders to have him committed for treatment. But her pleas had gone unanswered. What he did was horrible, atrocious, she said. But she also added that the system had let him slip through every safety net. Earlier in the year, Brown had called 911 claiming strange, man-made materials were inside his body, controlling him. It was clearly a delusion, the product of his mental illness. Instead of being guided toward medical help, he was charged with misusing the 911 system. And when his case came before a magistrate judge, despite his criminal record, homelessness, and mental health issues, he was released on nothing more than a written promise to appear in court. That decision has since become one of the most controversial points in the case. Many now ask if Brown had been supervised, treated, or kept in custody, would Iryna still be alive? The tragedy goes deeper than one man's violence. It highlights a haunting reality about how society handles people like Brown. On paper, he was dangerous, an armed robber with a history of erratic behavior. In practice, he was left to wander without proper help, teetering between instability and violence until something snapped. And when it snapped, it claimed the life of an innocent young woman who had already endured more pain than most people will ever know. For Iryna's family, the heartbreak is indescribable. Her father, still in Ukraine due to wartime restrictions, couldn't even attend her funeral. Imagine the agony of knowing your daughter fled bombs and missiles, only to be killed in a country she thought would be her sanctuary, and not even being able to say goodbye in person. She was laid to rest in North Carolina, surrounded by her grieving mother, brother, sister, and community members who mourned the senselessness of her death. But the questions remain. Who truly failed Iryna? Was it Brown alone, or a justice system that had chance after chance to intervene and didn't? Was it a mental health system that left his mother helpless, unable to get him the treatment he desperately needed? Was it a transportation system that didn't have proper security measures in place on that train? Or was it a combination of all these failures colliding into one unthinkable moment? To understand the depth of this failure, one has to look closer at Brown's past. His schizophrenia diagnosis was not a secret. His violent tendencies weren't hidden. His homelessness was visible. His prior convictions were well documented. He was a walking warning sign. Yet, at every step, the response seemed half-measured or misdirected. Release instead of supervision. Charges that didn't address the root of his problems. Even his mother's efforts to commit him were unsuccessful. She herself admitted she had to eventually kick him out because he became too aggressive to live with. Alone and untreated, his instability only worsened. Some argue that the judge who released him earlier in the year had little choice. The charge was minor, the jail overcrowded, and the system unequipped to handle long-term psychiatric needs. But others believe that's precisely the point, that tragedies like Iryna's death are not random, but the inevitable result of neglecting the mental health crisis until it spills into violence. Meanwhile, Charlotte's transit authority has also faced criticism. At the time of the murder, no guard was on the train itself. Patrols exist, but not dedicated personnel on board every ride. Could a guard have stopped the stabbing? Perhaps not. But could their presence have deterred it? That question lingers, adding yet another layer to the haunting what-ifs. For the public, the video footage of the stabbing was the most chilling reminder of how fragile safety can be. One moment, a young woman sits quietly after work. The next, she is gone. No warning, no reason. Just a stranger's knife and a lifetime of dreams erased. It felt less like a crime and more like a nightmare come alive, a nightmare that anyone could stumble into. And that's what makes the story resonate so deeply. Iryna wasn't involved in risky behavior. She wasn't walking alone down a dark alley. She wasn't provoking anyone. She was doing what countless people do every day, taking public transport home after work. Her death shattered the illusion that safety is guaranteed simply by leaving danger behind. It forced people to ask themselves, if someone can escape war only to be murdered on a city train, how safe are any of us really? The tragedy has since sparked larger conversations about crime, mental health, and accountability. Politicians debate whether stricter laws are needed. Advocates argue for better treatment programs. Families of victims demand to know why red flags are ignored until it's too late. But amid the arguments and policies, the human cost is often overlooked. For Iryna's family, no law, no program, no debate can bring her back. All they have left are memories of a daughter and sister who loved animals, laughed easily, and believed that America would give her a chance to live the life she deserved. Her story also reminds us of the fragile line between survival and tragedy. She escaped bombs, air raids, and the terror of war, only to lose her life in a place that promised safety. It's a cruel irony, one that underscores not just the randomness of violence, but the deep cracks in systems meant to protect both the vulnerable and the public. And it leaves us with haunting questions. If the warning signs were so clear, why weren't they acted on? If Brown's mother begged for help, why didn't the system respond? And if someone like Iryna isn't safe, who is? The courtroom will eventually decide Brown's legal fate. He faces first-degree murder charges and, if convicted, may spend the rest of his life behind bars. But the broader questions won't be answered in a courtroom. They linger in the minds of every parent, every commuter, every immigrant who wonders whether safety is ever truly guaranteed. It is a warning about what happens when mental illness goes untreated, when justice becomes paperwork instead of protection, and when we mistake survival for safety. She deserved so much more than to become another headline. She deserved to live out her dreams, to heal animals, to laugh with her family, to grow old in peace. Instead, she became a symbol of a failure that cost her everything. So as you hear her story, ask yourself this: who failed her? Was it just the man with the knife, or was it a chain of missed chances and ignored warnings stretching back years? And if those failures remain unaddressed, how many more innocent lives will be lost before something changes? Because if a young woman can survive the bombs of war only to be murdered on her way home from work, then the real question becomes, how safe are any of us really?